And welcome back to Subculture on centralcoastradio.com, where we're going to take a look now at a brand new parody musical that is on in Melbourne. And this is a little bit of a weird one because if you remember a few years ago, there was kind of a really grotesque film that grossed out the entire world called The Human Centipede. Now, you might remember that it screened at a festival in Melbourne and people were throwing up and some people fainted. And I know they say that quite often about films and they say it as a thing and it didn't really happen. But I was there at the Melbourne premiere of this film in Melbourne, and I can say people did faint and people did throw up. So much so that when the second film came out, they gave us a sick bag. Well, now they have turned this film into a parody musical, and Kyle and I went and checked it out the other night at the Alex Theatre in St Kilda. And mate, what were you thinking about going into this? Because going into this, I was like, how can they possibly turn this into a parody comical kind of thing when the original material is so full on?
Yeah, I was kind of interested in myself, as you say. Like, it is kind of such a grotesque movie. I mean, I know the movies, at least the first two of them. I haven't actually watched the third one yet. And now after seeing this, I want to. But yeah, I'm glad that for this one that they focused so much on the first movie because particularly the second movie is so dark and so brutal that, like, in its content, that it just wouldn't have translated well into the comedy that they were going for.
Yeah.
But they've managed to fit the plot of the first film fairly closely into the, like, work it very well into the play. And uh I mean, they've changed the ending just a little bit to make it a bit more comedic, but no, I was very surprised by just how funny it was. How funny it was. I guess like the idea, like the whole stitching people mouth to ass is is kind of still gross, but the play, it really kind of goes into that and plays up on how ridiculous and disgusting of an idea it is.
Yep.
And so in that way, it plays out kind of like a gross out comedy with yeah, I think that they managed to translate it to stage really well. How did you think they did with it, Ned?
Yeah, I think they did it quite well. Like for the uninitiated out there, this is actually directed by Gabriel Ward, and like Kyle said, it doesn't stray too much from the film. It centers around psychotic German surgeon, played here by Bo Wharton, who dreams of creating his very own human centipede, and he soon has some unwilling victims in the form of two naive tourists. Lindsay, played by Isabel Lanigan, and Jenny, played by George Gleason. And then he eventually ends up with a third tourist as well, Katsuro, played by Jacob Kuek. But while he puts his evil plan to work, he's unknowingly being hunted down by two old school detectives, Voller, played by Liam Hartley, and Kranz, played by Oliver Caton. And Caton and Hartley also wrote this play as well, I should point
Okay.
out. So yeah, like I think it one of the things I always find interesting about these parody musicals is, and I've seen a few over the last few years, sometimes they just go for the obvious jokes. And as a result, they're not as funny as they should be. But I thought when they put together the Stranger Things musical, they did it really well. And they've done the same thing here as well, where it doesn't just go for the jokes that you think that they're going to go for. They do make it a little bit different, like having the two kind of almost Hitchcock detectives that feel like
Mm.
they've met Laurel and Hardy. Like there's that real crossover there with the different characters, and they've made it different enough so that it looks creative, but they've kept the story so closely to the film that if you were a fan of the film, that you would love it as well. Because I think sometimes that can be a bit of a daunting task for people putting together these parody musicals based on a film, because you want to make it in such a way that if someone's never seen the film, they're still going to enjoy the theatrical production. But you also get the hardcore fans going along and criticizing them if it's too different from the film. So, what about you? Did you think that that having those detectives and stuff like that, did you feel that that worked and did further it a little bit?
Yeah, I think that the whatever changes that they made, the ones that really kind of stood out to me, I think I've only watched the first maybe two, three times, maybe. I say only. Oh, I've only watched it three times. Um, but yeah, I think that the small little changes that they made like that really helped play up the whole comedy aspect. And like you say, it really is it's close enough that me, somebody that's watched the story and somebody that's familiar with it can recognize the story. And I do think that anybody that even somebody who hasn't seen the movie would still be able to appreciate it. I like that the framing device that they used, that they gave the story the play is it's actually kind of a parody of The Princess Bride,
Yeah,
with the old man reading his his grandson a story, but it's the story of the human centipede.
yeah,
And like it's so like just that idea like sets it off straight away that it's just it's full on comedy. It's just ridiculous. And yeah, as I say, like mostly the plot is mostly there, but also how they managed to turn it into a musical. Like I mean, the songs and all that I thought were really good, but I really like the choreography in it as well. I mean, I've got to say, just my absolute most favorite part of it was the tap dancing number. Like,
yeah.
I never expected to see a human centipede dancing on stage like that. But yeah, that was my favorite part. But also, the choreography involved in here was just so impressive. Like not just the dancing and all that, but which that was great as well. But the actual the set changeovers that are done throughout the show, they're done by the six performers themselves. Like
Yep.
normally, yeah, normally these kind of shows would have stagehands like that moving things around. But the actors themselves, not only did they need to remember their lines and their lyrics and their marks, but also the marks of the set and like the walls that they're going to be moving around throughout the show. It's kind of like a ballet in
Yeah.
that way. Like, yeah, I thought it was really impressive.
Yeah. Now it contains 18 original songs that have been put together by composer and musical director Thomas Curry. And I found those tracks to be pretty funny, but also very, very catchy. I found myself humming along to Three Heads Are Better Than One and We Are Effed as we left the
Oh
theater.
yeah.
But those tracks are also brought together marvelously well by the cast. Isabel Lanigan actually has a classical background. I know, it sounds really weird. Someone with a classical background doing Human Centipede the musical, but that really showed when she was performing. I thought she really, really made those numbers so that was something that you remembered. But having said that, there was a little bit of a weakness on the night that we went, and that was the audio mix.
Yeah.
There were times when it felt like people's dialogue and lyrics were being drowned out by the music, and like it's an easy fix, down the music a little bit and up the actors' mics. But yeah, I just felt on the night that you and I went that that was something that kind of got in the way of a few of the numbers.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's the one part that I think was kind of lackluster. I mean, I can't even like I couldn't put it on the venue because I've been there before and the sound's been fine. I can't you couldn't put it on the entire show because like during dialogue, very often the actors were much louder than they were when they started singing. Like once
Yeah,
they started singing, that's when the volume kind of dropped down. And like one of the worst parts of that was the actor playing the old man, like the narrating of it, like that was those were the parts that it was at its worst because it wasn't the character the actor wasn't like like belting out a song. He was just like reading out dialogue, but the music was just so deafening that um you couldn't hear them at all.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, so I mean, I think we were close up enough that we were still able to hear
yeah.
um some of the parts, even if the mixing wasn't that great. But we had heard from some other people that were further back in the room, and yeah, they weren't able to hear at all, which I'm hoping that they were able to fix that for the future shows. But yeah, it was definitely, it's kind of a pity that it was there for opening night.
Definitely, yeah. So if you do want to go along and check out the Human Centipede parody musical, it has finished in Melbourne now, but it is
Mm.
looking to head to other capital cities and regional areas around Australia. So just keep a little bit of an eye on their website, and yeah, hopefully you'll be able to go and see it as well. But mate, we better go to another song. But glad you enjoyed the Human Centipede as much as I did, and I can't wait to see what the next TV show or movie that they decide to parody on theater is going to be, because we've seen some brilliant ones just recently. You are listening to Subculture on centralcoastradio.com. Awesome.